Welcome to 2026, our new year of What's the Buzz in its 5th season. I'm so excited you're here. And today we'll talk about what are the top lessons learned from bringing Agentic AI into banking. Everybody's been talking about Agentic AI last year, but I've seen very, very few people go beyond the what if, the visionary scenarios, the state of the art, art of the possible, whatever you want to call it. Today we'll dive in and we'll talk about what's real and what's working. So let's jump right in. All right, welcome back for another episode of What's the Buzz, where leaders share how they have turned AI hype into outcome. Today we'll talk about the top lessons from deploying Agentic AI in banking. And who better to talk about it than someone who's actually done that? Mo Jamous. Mo, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me, Andreas.
Wonderful. Mo, maybe can you share a little bit about yourself, who you are and what you do for our audience who might not be familiar with you yet?
So I'm Mo Jamous. I've been in the financial industry for the last 15 years, majority of my career. I spent the majority also my career around data, technology, and digital. Really looking forward to the discussion today. So thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Hey, we met in Austin at Generative AI Week in November, and we said we definitely need to have a conversation about this. What's working? How are you bringing it to the enterprise? So I'm so excited that you've made yourself available. I know you're incredibly busy, so hope folks for you in the audience, you appreciate our conversation as well. By the way, if you're joining us live, please put in the chat where you're joining us from. I'm always curious to see how global our audience is. And if you want to learn about how you can turn technology hype into business outcomes, consider picking up a copy of my book, The AI Leadership Handbook, where you'll learn all about that. Also, by the way, I have a new book coming out. Let me show that very briefly too. It's called The Human Agentic AI Edge, and it helps you shape your next generation AI-ready teams. There's so much talk about AI, and we need to use it, we need to roll it out, but not so much guidance on how do you do that, how do you do it well, and what do you need to do as a leader. So stay tuned. It's coming out at the end of February, so you can learn more. All right, now, Mo, in good old-fashioned, should we play a little game to kick things off?
Why not? Go for it.
So here we go. When I hit the buzzer, the wheels will start spinning, and when they'll stop, you see a sentence. And I'd like for you to answer with the first thing that comes to mind and why, in your own words. So are you ready for What's the Buzz?
Yep.
Okay, here we go. If AI were a sports car, what would it be? 60 seconds on the clock. Go.
I would say Mercedes Formula One car.
Oh, okay. Why Mercedes and why a Formula One car?
I've always loved Michael Schumacher, and he was always one of my favorite drivers. So I would always want them to win. And knowing how powerful AI is, I can always use that help. So
wonderful. I love it. It is very powerful, right? And I mean, sounds like you're in the pole position as well, seeing this from a very exciting angle at an exciting time. So I'm curious. We talked a little bit about this at Generative AI Week. You said you've deployed Agentic AI in your organization, but I'm curious, what has your journey been like? Where are you at right now in the organization, and what are some of the key learnings?
Yeah, I mean, just to set the context before we kind of dive deep into banking and where are banks with Agentic AI, I think just it's always fair to say that the Agentic AI technology itself is in the nascent stages as a technology, and I think it's fair to set that context so everyone. A lot of companies feel that, oh my gosh, we are so behind in implementing Agentic AI. I think everybody feels that way, which really tells me it's not really everyone is behind. It's just the technology is still taking hold and maturing. And I think we are seeing it something that it's an amazing and powerful technology that we're seeing maturing in front of our eyes. Just to see kind of where we were a year ago, and when things came up with MCP and agent to agent communication, and a lot of protocols to how make agents talk to tools and be able to do more. I think that's been very, very powerful in 2025. Saying that, I think for in the banking industry and or any regulated industry, you're always gonna see things move a little bit slower than a non-regulated industry, which is always fair to say. I think our journey for us with agentic AI in the banking world has been around, okay, well, starting with the things that are not customer facing, things like productivity, for example. Like, how do we use agents and build agents that will allow us to make our employees more productive and be able to better help and give them the new capabilities and added intelligence to help our customers. So the way we kind of been thinking about productivity in particular is, well, to say, like persona based. So if we look at if we take PDLC, the product development lifecycle, within the product model, we have 4 personas. A software engineer, a product manager, a designer, an agilist. And then what we've really kind of been looking at it, okay, well, how do we make each of these personas more productive and build agents that will really kind of help enhance the productivity and accelerate the speed to market and getting the products in the hands of our customers. But also outside of PDLC, I want to show we'll talk a little bit more about more concrete examples later. But then also outside of the PDLC, we'll look at the bankers, branch bankers. How do we make them more productive? We'll look at call center agents. How do we make them more productive, et cetera, et cetera. So we're looking at productivity as persona based and identify the set of agents for each of the personas, and how do we use agentic AI to help them make them more productive. So I think, and this is really what I consider the productivity bucket. But then also we have 2 similar buckets that I would probably say outside of productivity, things like how do we grow the business and identify business opportunities with agents and building agents to really boost whether sales or improve customer experiences. And then the third one, I would say operational excellence or operational efficiency, things like fraud, cybersecurity, things around DevOps, and then data center management and high availability and resilience failover things that we could do with agents. So in my mind, these are the 3 buckets where kind of identified where we can build and deploy agents in.
So to me, that's especially interesting because in a lot of the workshops I give in my interactions with leaders across different industries, they always ask, show me the use cases. Show me the use cases for Copilot, for ChatGPT, for some AI tool. And in my perception, it's indeed a lot about productivity and personal productivity. And I know before the emergence of these tools, we were actually more talking about operational efficiency, operational excellence. Where can we use AI in HR? Where can we use AI in finance? What are the business drivers? What are the KPIs? Now I see a lot of the conversation is about how can I write a better email? How can I summarize my meeting minutes? And how can I go beyond that? Where do you feel this conversation is from your vantage point, and where and how does personal productivity help maybe unlock some conversations, open some doors now that it's in anybody's hands?
Yeah, I think I'll give a couple of examples. So if you look at the developer persona that I mentioned earlier, we're giving developers very powerful tools to generate code, lots and lots of massive volumes of code that are AI generated, and that is amazing and that's very, very powerful. But pretty quickly you'll notice that you're generating all of that code, but then you're creating a bottleneck when it comes to code reviews. So you have all of these like commits that you've made, but there's not enough people that are able to keep up with that level of frequency of commits that are coming in. So one of the things that we've done, we built an agent to automate code reviews, which we kind of says we've evaluated about. We're doing hundreds of thousands at U.S. Bank. We're doing hundreds of thousands of code reviews or merge requests a year across the entire technology organization, and it normally takes about an hour to do a merge request if you look to any developer, and then. We built agentic capabilities that took it, from almost an hour to less than 10 minutes to be able to review a merge request end to end. And that is super powerful, not just only saves money or actually produce efficiencies, but it also accelerates the whole development life cycle. And it improves the quality of the product at the end of the day. Because if you have so many merge requests that are coming in, but you're not able to keep up with the reviews, then eventually you're going to have quality issues if you're putting things in production without being reviewed properly. So a little kind of agent like this has really took about 2 to 3 weeks to build. I mean, it's not very difficult to build these agents, but it's super powerful in terms of the impact that it can have in the entire development life cycle. Another capabilities we're looking at, for example, product managers. They do a lot of they have a lot of documents, a lot of research, a lot of ideas, a lot of big ticket items on the roadmap. Looking at building agentic capabilities to be able to help automate the creation of those user stories out of the product documents, prioritizing some of those stories and refining them as we put them into the backlog. So that really makes a huge impact on the productivity of the teams and the acceleration of the development life cycle.
That's awesome. Great to hear. Sounds like some really tangible benefits and also with manageable effort. Is it 2-3 weeks to build the agent, given that there are thousands or hundreds of thousands of commits to the code base? Sounds like it's really saving a lot of time. What are you seeing in other parts of the business? How are they viewing this? You mentioned agentic AI is still rather nascent. I would agree. What's the risk appetite? What's the opportunity that other business units see?
Yeah, look, I think everybody understands the value and the power of agentic AI and really know that, in the next couple of years, our world will be completely different in how we build software and how we deliver value to the customer. But I think, everyone at least understand for the foreseeable future that this technology is not magic and it's not really going to do things, on its own. I think having a human in the loop is always going to be the case, at least for the foreseeable future. I mean, we see a lot of opportunities, with how bankers interact with customers. How do they present opportunities to them? How do they talk about opportunities with the customers? We've seen things that bankers in the branches do spend half an hour to an hour or more on a manual task, and building agents to help automate or semi-automate some of this capability with the banker pushing the button, the go button before the task is executed. So there's tons of opportunities there as well, but also in the call center, which this is probably every company is looking at opportunities, with knowledge-based documents when customers call, being able to assist the call center agent with making sure that they get and retrieve the right information as quickly as possible to help the customers, which actually not just only improves speed, but also the quality as well. Because when you add more intelligence to to the process, you're always making sure that you're getting the right documents and then in a curated way. And most of the times, with way better accuracy than you would get with most humans, correct? Because we are
Mhm.
prone to make errors as well as humans, and I think adding that level of intelligence goes a long way. But then also things, for example, like trying to understand customers' intent and deflect the calls based on what is the customer is calling about. Is this something that we can route to an automated queue or things like that? So these are ideas that every bank is looking at, every financial industry is evaluating, but really goes a long way. And I think it's not just only about the execution and building of these capabilities, but also the change management of a process of how do, once you build these agents, how do you get your team to adopt those agents? How do you make sure that you go through the rigorous review
Mhm.
process from a risk and governance perspective before you're able to deploy these capabilities into production?
So one of my previous guests said everybody just shows you the demos, but nobody
Yeah.
talks to you about how do you do the governance and what
Mhm.
happens when you've actually built your first agent. What does the life cycle look like? So it sounds a lot like that.
Yeah.
What were some of the hurdles that you ran into that you and your team maybe didn't expect when you started on this journey, or when you said, okay, now let's look at agentic AI and how that can augment what we do or change entirely how we do things? What were some of the hurdles?
Yeah, so I think there is a couple of things. Some of them are technical in nature. I think if you look in the industry, you don't really have home-ready agentic AI experts or resident experts. So a lot of our engineers who are smart, extremely smart engineers and amazing engineers or AI experts, they're still learning a lot about these technologies. So figuring out what does it take to really build an agent, what does it really take to put an agent into production in terms of making sure you have the proper guardrails, making sure that you have the gateways, making sure that you have the evals and the monitoring capabilities. I think there's a little bit of a kind of struggle still that I see in the industry overall, is companies not knowing what does it really take to productionize an agentic AI capability, from what is all of the components that you need in the ecosystem, from observability to evaluation to building to security to making sure you have the guardrails. So I think there was a lot of kind of learning process, and we had to go through that learning to
Mhm.
be able to get there. And I think the second aspect is definitely the change management aspect of it. Security and making sure what are the things that risk and compliance and security need to have before some of these use cases are approved. But then also, once approved, how do you get people to use them? I mean, also adoption is a big thing, because building an agent is one thing, but getting people to use it, especially when you have thousands of employees that need to be familiar with it and get comfortable with using some of those capabilities, it takes a long time.
Mhm. How do you facilitate that change management to get them to accept it, or to warm up to the idea, or to be even promoters of it?
Yeah, I think as part of kind of like, if you look at it, when we looked at our agentic AI enablement, strategically, kind of the way I thought about the strategy as a three pronged strategy, or one, I would say people, process, and platforms. And starting with the people, just making sure that we are upskilling our teams. We're making sure that we are getting our teams excited and have the executive sponsorship, around agentic AI and Gen AI overall. And then also just galvanizing the whole organization around agentic capabilities through hackathons, events, and really kind of brown bag sessions, just to be able to get people to learn what's out there, what's being built, and learn from each other as well. And the second aspect, let's say, from a process perspective, is making sure that we have the governance council, between technology, risk, compliance, and security, that is reviewing and approving all of the use cases that are going into production. And then last but not least is really building out the platform, which are the things that I mentioned, from the gateways to the observability, to the security guardrails, and then the frontier large language models that we were going to use. But yeah, it just really, the change management aspect, back to your question, is really just hackathons and upskilling and communications and events as well, and gamifying that process as well. I think and getting the engineers and the teams excited about using some of those capabilities.
So I can tell you, my mind is racing. I have so many questions that I want to ask. We only have about 10 minutes timer. So, but when you so rightfully shared, it's one thing to build an agent. It's another thing, or a different thing, to get it adopted and to get it used well. How do you measure success in that situation? What are some of the metrics that you look at, some of the metrics that you maybe report out to your stakeholders, and what can others who are earlier on their journey take away from this?
Yeah, so that is super critical, Andreas. And actually, throughout my career, I kind of believed in philosophy like fact-based engineering or dragon-driven development, where part of the instrumentation and measurement is built into the capability we're building. So I think, to me, instrumenting your agents as you're building them is super critical to be able to measure usage and consumption, along with ROI. So one of the things we've done was, actually, as we are creating those agents, we actually added an extra components or metadata components that allow us to kind of define what type of agent it is. So let's say if it's an agent that's supposed to boost productivity, so this is a productivity agent. And let's say this agent is supposed to save you an X number of dollars. Like, let's say it's going to save you $100 every time it runs, because if a human was to do it, was going to be $100 an hour or whatever, or $50 an hour, whatever the right rate you have. And then what we actually have done, now that you have instrumented the agent with that type of data, all what we had to do is to just start counting how many times the agent actually successfully executes. And all of a sudden, first of all, you're able to tell how many people are using it. And then second, how much value it's creating for the business based on the amount of time that it runs. And I think this is, it sounds basic, but it's actually super powerful in terms of being able to tell the story of really what value the agentic AI is creating for the organization, especially when you start to do it for every agent you create, and then kind of define the goal and the objective of the agent and the value it's supposed to create up front. And then you can start to aggregate that in a dashboard across different business units, across different areas, whether the 3 buckets we mentioned, productivity, sales, or efficiency. And then you're able to aggregate that at the enterprise level and demonstrate to leadership and the lives of businesses how much value you're getting out of agentic AI.
How do you do that when it's not necessarily a one-for-one comparison, meaning the person sits there, does this task, it would cost us $100. Now an agent does it and it costs a couple cents. But if it's because of a person usually completing this task or this transaction, it creates a much larger amount of value than the $100 that it would cost in time, basically. How do you think about business metrics with agents, where, yes, it's a transactional comparison, or it can be hours to seconds, dollars to fractions of a cent? What does it look like for business metrics or KPIs or process performance indicators?
Yeah, so from a business perspective, so like if you're using, for example, an agent that helps you sell better, because now you are giving, for example, a banker or within the digital flow more insights about, about a product that you're trying to sell. So you know what your baseline, what you're selling in terms of today, and each product you sell is an X number of dollars that brings to the organization. So as you are building those capabilities and moving the needle, and how many products you're able to sell, and counting how many times this agent got executed, and then each successful execution or conversion is associated with an X number of dollars, then it becomes also much easier to really understand the value that this agent is creating. So it's not just only about saving dollars in terms of productivity. In the bucket of productivity, maybe we think about it, and saving doesn't mean like it's really less people, it's just really producing more efficiencies where these dollars could be repurposed for value creation for the customer, or really growing the business in other areas.
I love that. That's music to my ears.
Yeah.
I feel a lot of organizations are somewhere stuck in this transactional comparison, apples to apples. Today, I have a team of people or a person doing this. Tomorrow, I have agents or a team of agents doing that. How long does it take? How much does it cost? But it's so good to hear that there are additional metrics, especially if it's about the operational efficiency and excellence, if it's about creating new value that you should look at. Now, Mo, you also mentioned you've obviously have agents in production. There are some things that the team is working on. Like any good organization, there's a healthy pipeline of things you're looking at. What is your recommendation for leaders who are earlier in their journey, who are now at the beginning of 26, just starting to look into this and say, well, we should be doing something with agents? How do they start with a pilot? How do they go from pilots into production? What is your recommendation?
Yeah, look, I think there are, I think a lot of organizations are getting stuck in the, I say, tool selection. Oftentimes people think we should only have one agentic framework or one tool or one capability. And I think that's a little bit unrealistic, in my opinion. I mean, imagine if today, forget about agents for a second, if someone comes out and say, I'm only going to have one SaaS product within my organization, and I'm going to only use that. And I think people will laugh at them, correct? Like, how realistic or really ridiculous that is. But the same thing, I think my advice is not to get stuck in tool selection, and just understand that one day you will live in a world where agents are getting created in different areas. Some agents maybe you'll be using Copilot Studio to create them. Other agents, you might be using a tool like LangChain. Some other agents might be getting created in Agentforce. So I think we don't get too stuck in tool selection. But I think it's important, maybe think about an architecture where you can create a single glass pane to be able to understand and monitor all of the agents that are being created within your enterprise. So I think if you're able to kind of build your own orchestration layer that's able to track all of the different agents within your organization, so you can understand the different capabilities, and kind of like have an agent registry, will go a long way. So just, I think, what I'm trying to say, don't get stuck in tool selection. Be open to the idea that you will have multiple agents coming from different sources. And then second, from a people perspective, I think it's also education and upskilling your teams on really kind of what are agents, they can create it, and what are what you can do with them. And start small. You don't really have to have, like I said, we started with this code reviews agent, which is really not super complicated to do, but had a huge impact. So find an area where you can create a straightforward, one or two agents. You can have quick wins and start to create momentum, building those one or two agents to begin with.
Wonderful. Mo, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your experience and your expertise with us. I certainly learned a lot about how to bring AI agents into business, what it takes, where the opportunities are, where we are in the industry. Sounds like it's still nascent, but good to hear from leaders like yourself that you're looking at this, you bring this into production, and there are lots of good learnings. So Mo, all the best for an exciting and successful 2026, which is at the beginning. And I would love to reconnect and hear how things are going in the future.
All right. Thank you so much, Andreas. Really enjoyed it, and we'll stay in touch.
Wonderful. Thank you. Folks in the audience, join us next time for another episode of What's the Buzz. Bye-bye.
Thank you.